Right. This is my Man of Steel review, basically, and just first off the bat, I want to start by saying these critics that are saying this movie isn't great are full of shit. Okay, it's complete and utter nonsense. Every single critique they have towards this is just a load of, uh, I mean, stuff about like 9/11 imagery and it exploiting 9/11 imagery to like get a rise out of people. That it's too choppy and that the action scene at the end is too much. I mean, I don't know. Like, look, this is a great Superman movie. It may not even be. I think it's different to the Christopher Reeve style movies. Definitely, I do think it actually does have some humor in it, despite what critics are saying that it's humorless and whatever. I don't know what they want. I mean, they complained about Superman Returns, which was a load of bollocks anyway. That is absolutely true. And we wanted a new modern take on Superman. Now, for me, it doesn't quite meet up to the Superman Earth 1 comics or to Birthright Superman comic. There are a couple of things I agree with that I don't like, that I think, in terms of the setup, don't really kind of work. Yes, I should say there's some. If you haven't seen it, there's some spoiler alerts in this, but or spoilers in this review. But overall, as a film, I would easily give it at least 75%. 75% in total. Like a 3.5 out of 5, which is very, very decent. Okay, maybe it didn't meet up to the trailers or whatever, but in terms of getting the character right, I think they did everything they possibly could to get that character right, and it was Superman. It was a kind, genuine, humane person who is forced into a situation that is beyond his, like that the ordinary, us ordinary mortals, it's beyond our control, but he can do something about. And that is, that is a Superman story. And I'm just, I mean, I get like there are certain things like in terms of, okay, it didn't quite live up to the trailers. That's a fact. The trailers made it look like it was going to be the best comic book movie ever, and it didn't live up to that. But I mean, it didn't stray far off that. It's definitely better than the Avengers. I'm sorry, it's definitely better than the Avengers. To me, it's as good as The Dark Knight or Batman Begins. It's just, it's okay. I should have gone through this a bit more logically, but the kind of films I prefer are like comic book movies are Watchmen, Sin City, Kick-Ass, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight. I like the edgier comic, or the Judge Dredd movie, the latest one. I like the edgier comic book movies, and but I do think that one of the things I was worried about is, are they going to make this Superman into Batman, essentially, like try and make him all dark and brooding and whatever, in a Batman-esque kind of way. And they really didn't. They portrayed Superman, he said, the kind of corny things that Superman would say, but with a kind of modern twist that kind of gave you that kind of oomph, like, hey, alright, this isn't the time where individuals like that are necessarily cool or in. But what's cool about Superman is he doesn't care if that's cool or in. He's just a good person. And so there are those lines like, Zod, you're a monster and I have to stop you. Lines that Batman would never say. You know, Batman would never, I don't think you'd ever hear that kind of coming from the lips of Batman. And what's great is putting that, you know, that iconography and that, you know, thing that's almost antiquated to our modern sensibilities, where we expect all our heroes to be these broken, brooding, you know, ultimately, you know, the purpose of their mission, underlying it, is something that is, you know, underlying it is something even that is somewhat neurotic or something like that. You know, like Batman, it's his parents and he's on this mission, and you know, the underlying meaning of his heroism is neurosis. That is not the same with this Superman. It's not neurotic. It is just he's a good guy. The problems with the movie, okay, one, I don't get why the hell Lois Lane knows who Clark Kent is. That is bollocks. And I don't see how they're gonna, I mean, this would be the perfect setup for a Superman franchise if they hadn't have revealed Clark Kent to Lois Lane. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. How is that even going to work? I mean, all of that energy that comes from their relationship is going to be broken. Amy Adams, fine as Lois Lane, but I think this was a movie that was focusing on Superman. It wasn't focusing on Lois Lane, it was focusing on Superman's journey. Yeah, she could have done more. She's a great actress, but this was a film that wasn't necessarily focused on her. Problem being, though, that they felt they had to focus on her, which was kind of silly. They probably should have just, you know, like not really brought. This should have been Superman Begins. Maybe we meet Lois Lane right at the end of the movie. They didn't need Lois Lane in this movie. They could have put Lana Lang in this movie, so as to keep it better to Superman lore, and that way you could have had a thing where, you know, Lana Lang does find out who Clark Kent is. You know, that would have been cooler. It would have been nice to spend a bit more time with the younger Clark, because I actually do agree with the critics on this. That was the better part of the movie. The younger Clark, the man trying to discover who he wants to be, what his mission is for this world, and stuff like that. You know, so I think they should have stuck more to Superman lore, followed him in Smallville, and his journey to becoming a journalist, and still had this hyper cool Zod invasion. By the way, Michael Shannon, absolutely brilliant as Zod. I felt every moment he was on screen. I don't see what the problem is, what they're saying. I haven't seen him in many other things. Maybe the problem is he's such a good actor that in this role he isn't as good as his other roles. But because this is the first time I've seen Michael Shannon, I think he's absolutely brilliant, and I'll definitely be looking out for him and watching his movies, because I thought he was excellent as Zod. I wish they had have had more time spent with the fathers of, you know, of Clark Kent, as you know, especially Kevin Costner, who had a great humanity to him. But I wanted to see more of him, not just teaching Clark to be afraid of the world, of him, you know, the world finding out about him, but also to teaching some moral values. But that can all come in the sequel. You know, this was about revealing Superman to the world. We've seen some scenes with, you know, Jonathan Kent, maybe they could save that for the sequel, where you actually see, okay, no, this is why Clark grew up to be such a moral person, because actually, like, the way the Kents brought him up they did bring him up to have these cherished values. So that's all there. I mean, I think they have to understand this in the context of this is a Superman Begins story, and then you can be critical of it from that point of view. I think what they try to do is do a Superman Begins story, but with all the Superman cast that isn't necessarily supposed to be there in Superman lore. Much better if they had have gone with Lana Lane as the love interest for this film, moved on to Lois Lane later. Much better if obviously Lois Lane doesn't know who Clark Kent is. There's a lot of fun to be had with that, and to try and do that in a modern way would be really, really cool. That's just evaporated a lot of the spunkiness that's going to happen in the relationship in the second movie, I think, in the sequel. Having said that, I don't know. I really think the critics are just being hard on this, because it wasn't maybe as good as the trailers made out, but it's still one of the best comic book movies ever made. It's definitely in the top 10. It definitely is up there with the Christopher Reeves movies. Maybe a notch below, maybe a notch above, but like they're there, they're on par. They're different takes for a different era, and this take suits this era perfectly. As I said, the main problem with this is them trying to take Superman characters that shouldn't have been introduced in this particular film yet, unless they were going to do the journey of Clark Kent, as a reporter in the Daily Planet. If they had have done that arc, then you could have introduced Lois, then you could have introduced Perry White, and it would have been much more organic. Whereas they just feel stuck in there because they thought, well, they have to be in a Superman movie. But they don't have to be in a Superman movie if this is Superman Begins. I mean, if you look at Batman Begins, actually a lot of characters that come in later, just weren't in it. They literally weren't in it. People, obvious ones like the Joker, obviously, but even more obvious, love interests that weren't in it. I'm sure if I went through the Batman movie, the Batman Begins movie, you will see that there were characters, like, for instance, Gordon wasn't commissioner yet. He was just a cop on the beat. It was Begins. It was like, this is the story of all of these characters' journey into the Batman world. This is not that story of all of the characters going into developing into the Superman world, and that's the biggest problem, and probably the only problem with this movie. The rest of it, 9/11 imagery. What the hell are you talking about? What do you think two superpowered beings is going to be like if they're fighting in bloody Metropolis? And saying that Superman didn't give a crap about, like, the people in the buildings. One, if there are people still in those buildings, when they're seeing them getting smashed apart, if they're not running towards the edge of the city, then they deserve to die. There's nothing he could do about it. He's trying to prevent more lives from being killed, which is like Zod's plan of destroying every single person on the planet. I'm sorry to be like, that whole conundrum of if you said, there's a little girl If you had to kill a little girl to save the whole planet, what would you do? It's an impossible moral conundrum, and they just decided to cut the Gordian knot and just be like, okay, we're just going to ignore that. And yeah, it would have been nice to see him save a couple more people apart from Lois Lane, but there certainly was a care there. The last scene, which is spoiler alert, is, Zod is literally about to murder people, and Superman's caught in this terrible, terrible thing. And I hope what they, terrible decision of whether to kill Zod or not. And I hope what they do is, now he's killed Zod, he feels incredibly guilty for killing the last of his people, and that he tries everything from now on not to kill people, because I don't like my Superman killing cats. That's not cool. But in this particular situation, it was just, he acted on instinct. It wasn't a rational choice that he would ordinarily make. But I think this is a great movie. I think you should go and watch it. I'm going to watch it again. The only problem I don't like about this as well is, like, I don't see how this sets up for a Justice League movie. I don't want a Justice League movie, first off. I want a Wonder Woman and a Flash movie in this style of looking at how would the world respond to a Wonder Woman? How would the world respond to Flash? Or how would Flash respond to the world? How would a guy who suddenly gets the powers of a god, respond to it? A genuinely good guy, but he's just he's a normal guy who is suddenly, he finds that he can do things at incredible speeds, like reaching that of the speed of light, which would give you amazing powers. And the physics behind that, if they stuck to the physics behind that, it could be a really, really awesome movie. As for Wonder Woman, I've got my idea, which I'm looking for some illustrators so that I can actually post a couple of pages of this Wonder Woman idea that I have, where it is about her coming to this world. She's, it's an interesting story. I'm not going to go into too much about it, but I think that needs to be done now. And I think that probably one of the reasons Superman hasn't had the impact on critics that it should have had is because they didn't do a Wonder Woman and Flash movie first. Superman is the goddaddy of them all. He should have come after them so that he could show what that represents, what this kind of like almost ultimate heroism represents, even though Wonder Woman to some extent is very much like that as well, the ultimate heroine. So maybe that could be done after. I'm going to do a part 2 to this actually, so bear with me.